Okay, green, red, yellow. Like, hold up your sign, like, maybe they didn't have the translation solved.
Yeah, maybe not.
Everybody on?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, we're set and ready. Oh, we got one more here. All right, for the sake of everybody's time, we'll go ahead and get started here. I really appreciate Adam Rivette coming out. I wanted to do a brief introduction, so I know you guys have heard some discussion. Adam came to a board meeting. We talked about his involvement with the county. Adam is with Integrated Fiduciary Advisory Services, and he's the Director of Retirement Plans. So adding Adam to the county, what his expertise allows us to do is to really hone in on the plans that we offer for retirement. And also within those plans, what investment options are there? And one of the things we quickly identified when Adam started looking at the plans we had between Empower and Nationwide was some of the investment options that needed cleaned up, that hadn't performed so well over time, that he could condense that down to allow a higher performance of options for people. And I think we truly found too, there was probably an overabundance of options for people. In addition, I know some people that were with Empower have kind of, everybody's going to merge over to Nationwide, and Adam's assisted with that. Depending, I guess there's some people who are going to leave their funds with Empower, but most people have merged over. Some of you maybe on this call are here today. But Adam will be able to provide information on what he plans to do moving forward. He wants to do continuing education with the county, talk about how things are going, get feedback from employees, see what we can continue to do to make sure that we're offering the best options for employees. And he'll continue to work with us and with Nationwide, our provider, to assure that everything is tip-top shape for you guys, the employees, is the key. That's what all this money is, a retirement. So we've had advisors in the pension plans. We haven't had an advisor with this deferred compensation, and I think it's time to we look at that and see what we can do. So Adam's here, and he's going to introduce himself, talk about things, and then answer any questions you guys might have.
Thank you, Nate. Yeah, so thank you, everybody. I know we were talking about other meetings earlier. I will try to make this the most exciting retirement conversation you've had all week. And I know the bar is low, but we'll work with what we do. So on that note, it is always my pleasure being local to actually get a chance to work with a local client and help people within my community. So under that, as Nate stated, really we had multiple goals when we started out with this, and that was I work with corporations and government entities on the retirement plans. That's my sole focus, and I've done this all over the country. And so when I had the opportunity to talk with the county I live in, it was even better. So with that, really, we're looking to provide you a best-in-class balanced program. So what does that mean? Really, what is success? And so success is you guys actually have enough money to retire one day. I mean, that's it. It's one goal. Part of that is a balancing act, and that's where I really come in. So the balancing act is weighing cost of the program, because any cost or fees coming out of it reduces your net benefit. And so that has to be a primary consideration. I'm always very aware of that. So a big part of what I do is a very non-glamorous behind the scenes job of negotiating between the vendors and the providers to negotiate for you lower and the best rates. So just to start out, when we looked at this, we looked at Empower, we looked at Nationwide, we looked at other companies, and ended up getting about a 35% cost reduction to consolidate to Nationwide. So there's the first thing. All fees in, 35% reduction, and that's not including some of the reductions we have on the investments themselves. That's just on the administrative fees. So we're balancing cost to try to get that to be the best outcome for you. We're looking at performance, and so that is we want your investments within reason, and so performance is also tied in with risk. But within reason, we want your performance to be the best it possibly can without taking undue risk. And so if we balance the cost, performance, and risk mitigation, that's where we have the sweet spot of trying to get you the best retirement outcome you can. And so we did that. So we had, I don't even know, probably 10 meetings over the last 6 months, looking at different things and analyzing. So analyzing everything from your target date fund options to the core investment menu, the different providers and what they were offering to the participants, and then to try to pick for you the best package that would deliver that outcome. So all of that being said, everyone seemed to have very favorable feedback on the nationwide service and program that was already in place. There were over 100 county employees already using it. So with that in mind, we ended up consolidating to nationwide. A couple dates I want to hit on before I get into some of the more nitty gritty. But for those participants that had an account at Empower, those balances, other than any funds that were in a fund called the Empower Government Guaranteed Fund, any other balances are migrating over to nationwide without any action needing to be taken on your part. If you were affected by that one investment, you've already heard from us a few times reaching out to try to help you facilitate or understand your options. But a couple important dates are coming up. And so first off, on July 15th, the Empower balances are going to go into what's called blackout. And that's a period at which your funds stay invested. However, they're inaccessible because Empower and Nationwide begin working together to try to make that sell-off, transfer of funds, and then set you up in your Nationwide account. So that starts July 15th. They are anticipating the blackout will be lifted on the 25th. And there's one more important date in the middle there, and that is for any active. So is anyone retired? I guess that's the better question. Retired. So if you're retired, this next date does not affect you. But if you're still working, it would. The July 19th payroll will be going to nationwide, even though we're in blackout. So if you had 3%, 6%, $100 of pay going to Empower, that will automatically transition over to nationwide. And that would be the first payroll on July 19th. So those are kind of the important dates to keep in mind. On the 15th, blackout starts. First payroll going to nationwide for the 19th. And then on the 25th, we should be out of blackout. As a reminder, really, we did this to reduce fees, try to provide a comprehensive best class experience. But then also one of the other big key factors with this was investment options offered to the plan that we could use. And so one of them that's always important with any group is you have it's called capital preservation. So money markets, stable values, or guaranteed accounts fall into this. They are for someone that's trying to take on little to no risk and get just a stated crediting rate or rate of return. So one of the big factors that also played a part in this is that fund with Empower was paying 1.7%. At Nationwide, and I just looked up the current numbers as of today, Nationwide's money market is paying almost 4.5% as of today. Their stable value has paid anywhere from 2 to 3%. Right now, we're right in the middle at around 2.5%. And so for those people that had their money in just a safety of principle, they didn't want to take risk. They just wanted to invest it and get a rate of return without that risk. They were getting a very low percentage, below inflation for the last 15 years. And especially in an environment where inflation has been heightened up to a few years ago, 9%, a less than 2% rate of return is not ideal for that participant. So going forward, we have both options included in the Nationwide plan. We have a stable value. Like I said, it'll credit generally between 2 and 3% on an annual basis. We have the money market right now crediting around 4.5%. So if you ever have questions or need help with that, let me know. But that was also another driving factor, is getting people who are already in the plan with money a better return on their balance without taking any undue risk. So for that person, another great factor is their fees went down by 1/3. Their return's going to double or triple depending on the option. So that's the results we're trying to do. We're just trying to help people get to retirement. A few of the retirees I helped on the phone with this recently, too, it was simply that's all they wanted to do. They had the balance over there, they transferred it, they're going to try to get a higher rate of return over here. I talked to someone this morning, it's going to lead to a $6,600 a year difference return for that individual with no change essentially other than it's moving from one to the other. So that's really our goal. That's what Nate's working for. That's what Jody and myself, we're all coming together to try to provide that experience for you. Some other changes that are tied into this as well. Target date funds, I just want to point this out because it's often the most utilized investment in any DC or defined contribution retirement plan. So what do I mean by that? So county employees that have been here in yesteryear may be on a pension or a DB plan. But for those employees that are working currently, a defined contribution is the county still giving you money towards retirement, but it's a set amount and that amount is paid in while you're working. The difference is with a pension, they're paying a set amount and they are paying that until you and possibly you and your spouse pass away. So really the benefit of the DC is that it's a finite amount of liability, exposure, and cost. The advantage to the employee in some cases is you actually have access to understanding exactly how much money you're getting, how you want it invested, and you have a very good idea of what you're going to have in retirement when you're doing this, because if you can find out what your rate of return is, what your goal is, what your needs are, it's a very good way to predict kind of where you need to be. For most people that aren't doing what I do for a living, you may not want to pick individual positions. You may not spend all your time clicking on the website for this. For those of you in that position, we have changed from the nationwide target date funds to the American funds target date funds. And the reason that's important is over the last decade, they have averaged anywhere from 1 to 1.5% higher return annually. Sorry, let me pop up my computer here. My profession does not look kindly on making inaccurate statements. And so when we look at that, for example, you won't see this on your screen, but we looked at a participant who was putting in 12% between themselves and the county into the retirement plan. They had a balance of $100,000. And what would that do? And they had a salary of $60,000. The difference between American funds, it averaged 9.95% over the decade. They would have had an ending value of $522,000 for their account. If they were in the Prairie Nationwide one, they'd have averaged 8.42 and would have had an ending balance of $450,000. So it's a $72,000 outcome difference. The reason I highlight that is not you going in and picking it and being an expert. That is essentially putting it into those target date funds based on age. So you see the fund, it says the 2030, 2040, 2050 fund. So first off, what does that day mean? The day is designed to be the year closest to when you think you're going to retire. So if you're ever looking at that, like which one should I be in? That's how they calculate it. It also starts for someone who's in their 20s. It's going to be 95% in stocks and equities. And every year they get closer to retire, it scales down risk by about 1%, moving them to safer asset classes, fixed income, money markets, bonds, things of that nature. So for someone starting out, they're taking more risk, they're hoping for higher reward. That's generally how it works out. So on the 2050 fund, it averaged just under 10% annually. Sorry, I'll show you two more. For the 2040 fund, it averaged 9.76%. And then for the 2030 fund, for someone closer to retired, it averaged 8.48%. So you can see the impact of how it changes the investment allocation and portfolio. It leads to your performance, but it's also mitigating risk. So as you offload some of those higher risk stocks, you're taking less risk. And as you get closer to retirement, obviously, if the market's doing all sorts of unfavorable activity, you don't want to feel, 30% downturn on your account. So that was another big thing that we changed that will affect a lot of people, because that's kind of the, I don't know what I'm doing and I want it done for me. What am I using? And so that's those target date funds. We also made some other updates and fund changes within the core funds. I'm not going to go into them all, but every change we made was designed to balance those three things: performance, cost, and risk mitigation. So I think what you'll find is you have a more condensed menu. I think we started with close to 60 funds. And what we found is we've got it down to about 30 funds. And the goal of that was to not cause paralysis of analysis. I go on, I look at this, I have 7 pages of funds. I wanted a large cap growth fund. I have 6 of them. Which one do I pick? There's also a participant behavior where you tend to pick the one that had the highest return on the piece of paper at the time you're looking at it, or a website. The problem with that is often cyclical market movements. The one with the highest return does not have the highest return the following year. So it kind of goes back to the old adage of you always want to buy low and sell high. However, human nature leads us to buy high and sell low. I got a call earlier today asking how they could buy NVIDIA stock. NVIDIA is up 240% year to date. It had a 7% shift from yesterday to today. It's extremely volatile. but it's on the news, it's making headlines, and it has had a really good outcome if you were in it a year ago. But right now, if you're buying it, you're paying almost 2.5 times what someone did a year ago. So with that, those are all the kind of factors we're looking at to try to provide a better outcome for you. So let me just pause for a second. What questions, anything? I mean, anything I can elaborate on?
Can you go through all that again?
Yeah, I'll try. Start from the top. All right, back it up. Yeah.
No. Were you tending to say that the fees, the administrative fees we were paying at Empower are less at Nationwide? Were you?
Yeah, so you will
Yeah.
be paying 35% less than you were
Okay,
previously.
because I've been with Nationwide now for a while, you know.
We also got
So-
a price decrease for everyone by 35%.
Oh.
Your fees essentially were neutral between Empower or Nationwide.
Okay,
But what we did is when we negotiated in
Okay.
to that consolidated relationship, I got a 35% fee reduction for
So-
Nationwide.
I'll start seeing that
Yes.
difference in my,
Correct, and
Right.
that actually went effective, like within the last 5 days, like the changes to the funds and the fees.
and now you're saying you've kind of restructured and minimized the number of the different funds that I'm invested in.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
in my plan, I have chosen to let them manage it for me. But I'll still see that same return, I mean.
Yeah, if you have elected for Nationwide to do it on your behalf, that's fine, and we're not
I
gonna
don't
change.
wanna look
that.
through
Yeah.
those ones
What-
either.
what
I don't
would-
know. First-
No, yeah, that's great, and that's a great program too, we have people at Empower using their version as well.
Okay.
And I was actually telling them, look, if you liked that, Nationwide is the same thing. What I will tell you, what we tried to do though, is they were restricted to the building blocks available. Now they have better, lower costs, and in some cases, better, lower cost and less risk building blocks to work with for your portfolio.
And as I'm, and they have all my data as far as, here's how old you are,
Mhm.
so my risk has come
Gone down.
down.
Yes.
Because I'm getting closer and closer, but it just seems like that stock market
Oh, yeah.
drive me crazy.
It can, and it's very important what you said is, so whether you're using a target date or they would call that a managed account or a managed account.
Yes.
Or working with a personal advisor, or if you have questions, ever sit with me. What we're looking at is as any participant gets older, now it can change depending on your financial situation. However, but for everyone as they get older, often they need to take less risk because they've saved, they've invested, and now the worry is 2009 happens, the market's down 40% and I'm retired. And someone very close to me, this happened, a federal employee, and they, their personal account was down 40%. I get a call, I said, you just gotta write it out. 2 years later, they were back where they were. However, I actually knew someone else who pulled everything out, went to cash. They just locked in a 40% loss. If you're 57, you will never recover.
Right.
So the managed account, the nice thing is it's taking the guesswork out for you. But the other thing is just not exposing yourself to that much risk. So what you'll find too, and the fees, and that's where fees do matter because it is, it's coming off your essentially whatever you like. If you would have made 9.5%, your fees 0.5%, now you made 9, right? So just as I highlighted the difference, 1.5% can make over a decade, $72,000 for the average person. That 0.5% would have been a $20,000 difference. Person to person.
Adam, can you just briefly
Yeah.
elaborate? I think the fee portion for a couple of people I've talked to, maybe some didn't even realize there was fees coming out. Can you just explain briefly,
Absolutely.
like those come out on the back end?
Yeah.
They don't draw your attention to it. Those were things that
Sure.
we're able to reduce.
Yeah, so one of the things, and this is really a lot of what we're doing, I don't want to say, it's not that this has been commonplace for 20 years or anything. This is really over the last decade, escalating to today, is a push to modernize, provide transparency, and really to just revamp the retirement landscape for, and this is private over public sector. What the old practice used to be is that you had an investment. The investment costs like 1% or 2%. It had all your fees built into that investment. And so you never actually saw fee or deduction. But let's say you were paying 2% for your fee. And that actual investment cost 0.5%. Your fee that was wrapped into that was actually 1.5%. To put it in a very similar light to like the county, the fee here, the average person was paying around 1.25%. What, either plan. Now, the average employee will be paying about 0.9% for everything. That's the average. Now, individual by individual, it's gonna change. There's an S&P 500 index fund we just put in with Fidelity. It costs 1.5 basis points is the fee. So 1.005%. That's the investment cost. So if you were in that fund and then had your administrative fees, you'd be all in at like 0.6, right? If you were in an international growth fund that had an average cost of 0.4%, you'd be all in just over 1%. So you and your decisions can affect your total cost, but that has more to do with your investment selection. The administrative cost is the controlled cost. And so that's where it's dropped by about 35%. And then the investment menu overall, we have stripped it out to the modern standard. There is no hidden revenue, there's no hidden fees, there is nothing baked in. Whatever you're paying, that is the net cost of the investment. So you see exactly what you're paying for anything and everything. Now, the bad news, you see your fee, like it'll be on your statement. And so for those of you already in Nationwide, you were seeing the fee. Those that were at Empower, it was, I don't want to say like, I don't want to like make it sound bad, but it was essentially hidden because you didn't realize that. I had multiple people tell me they weren't paying fees. I'm like, I assure you, I'm looking at your fees here, like, and, you know, but they didn't see it line itemed out. This is called transparent or fee disclosure. And that's actually like ERISA and the Department of Labor. They want your plan set up with fee transparency and disclosure. They also don't want revenue baked into your investments. They want a participant to understand clearly, I paid $200 this year in fees. They don't want you going, I didn't pay any fees, then you paid $1,000. And that's often how that worked out. So, sorry, was that a? Yeah. Well, so, yeah. Yeah, and I had multiple people call me and tell me, well, I paid no fees at Empower. Let's walk through. Yeah.
You're saying there's a money market option in that instead of funds?
Yeah, so there you have all your core investments, you have bonds, fixed income. You also have a stable value, which is, think of it as a fancy bond fund, but designed for minimal impact with what's going on. It's around 2.5% right now. There's a money market right now paying 4.5%. It's actually, I've seen it as high as 5 recently, and I've seen it as low as about 4.25. So money markets tend to shift.
So that fluctuates too?
Money markets always do. They shift with essentially whatever the.
Is that different than the money markets at a bank?
The bank usually, whatever they're lending it at, they determine the rate they're sharing back with you. So
It's just a straight.
well, they set their own rate. So I just looked at a credit union for a participant Monday, and the credit union money market locally was paying 2.5%. They're probably lending the money around 5%, and they're crediting you back 2.5%. So they determine the rate because it's what they choose. That's actually the Empower Government Guaranteed Fund. That's how that worked. So they were probably lending the money at 4%, and they were paying you 1.7. So that's when you have no fees, how that works. Someone always wants to make money. It's how they're making their money. So, and that's, you know, the good and bad of this industry.
So the money market in this is safer than mutual funds or whatever.
Yes, yeah, I mean, because it's just a short-term lending vehicle, it's essentially short-term lending. They're paying you a stated rate. Often they update it either monthly or quarterly, depending on how fast or high interest rates are fluctuating. Yeah, it's money market, I guess, with any large institution tends to be very safe and stable. Obviously, you could have a money market structured around a small institution that could not abide by those rules, but Nationwide, Fidelity, Empower, any of these institutions are massive and you're essentially backed by the company and their general account.
You know what?
The general account.
I think they're pretty good right now, banks, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and money market is a great way, especially if you ever have like an HSA and you're trying to just have your money invested or getting you some sort of return while you're needing access to it. a money market is a perfect vehicle because you're getting a crediting rate, yet it's fully liquid. So if you needed to use that money, you can get it. But if you're getting a 4 or 5% rate of return right now on it, well, it just sits there, that's a win. Any other questions? You guys have great questions.
How much am I gonna need when I retire?
It depends on your standard of living. Yeah.
My mother is 96 years old. So do I have to plan for 30?
You have to plan for 110. You're looking at that, so I mean, it's gonna be a long.
I better keep working.
Long run. Yeah, no, you know what, though, that is a great question, and one of the things, you know, if talking about something Nate mentioned that I didn't mention at all. One of the other goals for the county is to have education that's not just like, hey, we're making a change, this is what's going on, but to better inform you on those sorts of topics. One thing I like to do with an individual is run a projection. So you tell me I'm gonna retire in 5 years. I say, okay, what do you have? What are outside assets? I don't need your accounts and things, but I do need to know general balance. So we put it in, we run a 30-year projection and say, okay, in 7 years, your money's exhausted if you're pulling out at this rate. What you will often find is Social Security is replacing a much larger portion of income for people that are making under 60,000 a year. And so it's sometimes surprising how much it's making up. And then for people making more, sometimes it's surprising how little it's making up for. So there's a little bit of a teeter-totter there, but between what you've saved, Social Security, we run it out and we do a projection rate. The other item there that I see is often when someone retires, they initially have a slight peak in spending the first few years. Bought an RV, we bought a new expensive vehicle to drive around, we're going on cruises, we're going to tour Europe, whatever. That's normal. So 2 to 3 years increase in spending. Then you see kind of a plateau for a while. And then often when someone gets in their 80s, you see a steep drop off. So a lot of times this retirement projection looks like a linear line, which is never going to happen. But what happens is you exceed the line, then you kind of come in line with the line, and then you drop off like a cliff. Your number one bill for most people in their 80s is medical related. And so you can't do whatever you wanted to do anymore because health won't permit it. And all of a sudden you have someone that's using 40% of the income they were the year they retired. So good news, bad news, it sometimes is a self-correcting problem. But we can do that. We can look at, if you give me some information, we run it out and you have some idea where you're falling.
That's mainly a crapshoot.
Well, no, like, I mean, you can dial it in pretty good. It also helps, there's no right way and no well, there probably is an absolute wrong way, but there's no absolute right way to do it.
Okay.
Each person is unique. Each person has their own plan. The idea is usually, do they know what their plan is? And if they do and actually follow through with it, they can succeed in many different ways. Like I'll talk to someone, they have rental properties, they've never saved $1 for retirement, and they're gonna be fine because they have 4,000 a month coming in on rentals. But they have to understand, know what it is, have it budgeted and have it figured out. If you wait till 2 years before retirement and then decide you're gonna look at it, and this happens to me, I call it the Thanksgiving Day conversation. You say, I'm 60 years old, I'm retiring at 62. And I say, first, why? And they go, because I'm 62. Right? Well, that's not necessarily a reason, that's just an age. And they say, I have 25,000 in an IRA and I make 80,000 a year. And I go, what else do you have going on? They go, nothing, but I'm gonna be 62. All right, so that's a situation we can't fix. Like we don't have time on our side, we don't have savings on our side, there's no replacement vehicle. You have to prepare. So anyway, if you have questions like that, ask me, I'm happy to help anyone.
If you're retired today, but you still want to work part-time, is there an amount that you make that affects?
Oh, yeah, so, well, yeah, once you qualify for Social Security, you have to be observant of flying under the threshold, usually around 20 grand a year.
20 grand?
Yeah. So it depends on you and what your tax is. You're also paying tax on Social Security because it's income, which people may or may not understand. So there's a lot of things people will not fully understand until they get very close to retirement, and they can surprise you. Like, okay, Social Security is sending me $1,800 a month and I owe them $300 back. Why? Like, I mean, it doesn't seem right, but that's how it works. Same thing with Medicare or Medicaid. People often don't understand when you have to take it, if you sign up or don't sign up. And it can be surprising, and sometimes alarming. But yeah, if you're going to continue to work, there's a conversation you should have about, should I collect Social Security just because I qualify? Or should I delay and collect a higher amount in another couple of years? So that's the kind of stuff that unfortunately in a group setting, it's very hard. It's like going to a doctor and like, you have a migraine, you have pink eye, and you broke your leg. I can't give one diagnosis that fits all three scenarios. So, but I can on an individual basis usually give you a pretty good idea what's applicable to your situation. So, and that's what I'd like to do though for the county. I'd like to have more opportunities to have either group or even one-on-one education to help people and just as many people as we can get across that retirement finish line with as much as possible. So they have a comfortable standard of living in retirement. It's one thing to retire, it's another to retire comfortably. So.
And Adam, is it correct? I think as we talk about preparing for retirement, I think in discussions we'd had, did you say you try to educate people somewhere in that 10 to 15% range of your salary would be ideal, I guess? Whether people can do that or not, but that's ideal. So if the county's putting in 7, if you can put in at least, then.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And we always say there's no, a rule of averages for everyone. But the rule of averages for retirement is right now, current savings rates, they're anticipating you need to be saving collectively through however it's coming in between 10 and 15%. To be able to have a shot between that Social Security of replacing the amount of income for your standard of living. Obviously, towards the 15% is going to be much more comfortable than the 10. But even a decade ago, people were projecting 6%. And as you can see, just with the costs and things, we're already saying now the floor has risen 4%. So I'm just telling people, I've never had someone tell me they save too much. And I understand life happens. So I'm married, have 3 kids, 2 dogs, and I have life, right? So I get it. We all have bills, we all have expenses, we all have things we want to do. But in order to be comfortable at retirement, really right now, the bogey is to try to get 10 to 15%. And so if the county's giving you 7, that's fantastic. So most for-profit companies are nowhere near. And so you're getting a huge head start. And then if you can try to close that gap with like a minimum being 3, but if you could even shoot for like a match of that 7 and 7, you would be sitting very comfortably over the years for retirement. And obviously for an individual starting in their 20s, that looks very different than someone starting in their 50s. I've worked with people who end up trying to, put in 20, 25% in their final years working to try to make up or close a gap, from starting later. But the earlier someone can start, obviously, the better for them. And that's one of the things we want to push. And I know, especially new people coming into the county as employees, to get them adequately set up so that when they are 57 or 60 or whatever, they're not trying to put 20, 25% of their pay in, that they don't have to. Is anyone sleeping? Good. The most exciting retirement conversation of the week.
Well, accessibility is a thing. Like I was always plugging at, money market at a bank where I can get to anytime I want if I need to, but also saving that money in it. If I'm aggressive, I put 7% in, and a year from now, if something happens, I need that money. Fees, fines, what's the deal?
Yeah, so anytime it goes to a qualified retirement account, and so there's a perk to the qualified feature, but there's also a detractor. So the perk is you're getting some sort of tax benefit. So within your plan, you have the ability to save it pre-tax or traditionally. So I don't pay tax today on whatever I'm taking out of my paycheck and putting in the plan. That's your benefit. How that works though is you put $5,000 this year in the plan. It reduces your income by that. You're not paying tax. Great. You could also do it as Roth. And Roth is you put it in after tax. Roth is extremely attractive if you're younger, you have a long time horizon, or if you're in a lower tax bracket where you may have a very low, if any, real tax implications, you're essentially saving for free, and that money will grow tax-free, not only the initial amount, but any growth, any gains, tax-free forever. So for a new employee, a lot of times we'll talk to someone in their 20s or 30s coming in, you say, you could do this pre-tax or Roth. For you, it's very likely to be a slam dunk to do this as a Roth Because if you have a 30 to 40 year time horizon and your money's going to potentially quadruple over that period, I'm either saving myself $1,000 in taxes or maybe saving myself $4,000 in taxes. How it works, so with pre-tax, the good side, you saved yourself taxes now. They don't tax you all at like, I retired, now I get a big tax bill. They tax you at your current tax rate in retirement as you're making withdrawal. So if you're pulling $500 a month out of your account, that's what you're paying taxes on. So it is incremental. The idea traditionally was I'm in a lower tax bracket when I retire than I am while I'm working. And if that works out, that can be good as well. So I don't want to say there's a right or wrong. Usually the older you get and the closer to your peak earning years and the end of your career, the more attractive pre-tax is. And early on, and when you're at a lower income level and you have a long time horizon, the more attractive Roth is. And all of that was to answer your question. So that's the perks of doing it in a retirement plan. You're getting some sort of tax benefit. You do it at a bank or credit union, the perk is you could pull it out, tap into it, do whatever you want. However, you're not getting any tax benefit. So you're paying taxes on it and you're paying taxes on your interest and growth. So if you're saving for long-term for retirement, it is probably the most beneficial to do it in IRA, 457, 403B, 401k, however you can do it, qualified account. But it is very important. I would tell any participant that you should have a savings and you should really not look at your retirement account as your savings, it's your retirement account. And so to have like a savings at a credit union or bank, that is a tremendous benefit, because if that especially keeps you from tapping into your retirement and then paying a penalty or fee, that's important. So I would often say if you're in the position, build up that savings and try to keep that at a certain level. Crickets. Anything else anyone heard? Well, thank you all. Well, yeah, I really appreciate your attention. No one slept. I didn't see any phones out, no Minecraft or anything, so we're good. Yeah, so did everyone get a flyer?